Greetings, everyone. This is Julie Wukelic. I'm CEO at Believe in Me, and we're just giving folks a couple more minutes to go ahead and get logged into our Q2 grant report information session. I thank everybody for joining us today. Hope everyone's having a wonderful afternoon, and really looking forward to helping clarify some of the questions that may be popping into your head as you're reviewing our new grant reporting system for the first time. We're going to be covering a few different topics today. I'm hoping everyone can hear me okay. If you can't, please pop us a chat and I will try to accommodate any needs for audio visual. But during today's information session, we're hoping to share an overview of our updated reporting requirements, kind of go over how to go ahead and enter your receipts manually using our new process, and kind of why we've implemented that. We're going to review what some of those eligible proof of payment documentations look like if you don't keep receipts, and then kind of the justification for why we're asking for these by sharing some of the IRS stipulations and a training guide, as well as some essential tips for maintaining accurate financial records. So unless anybody has any questions at this point, I think I'm going to go ahead and start going through our review. Does anyone have any questions? Good. Okay. Well, I just wanted to quickly give an overview of our updated reporting requirements. And in order to do this, I am going to go ahead and just kind of share some information that was in the emails that went out. And Michelina actually got to be my guinea pig. So you should have received an email from us regarding this new change. And in this, we will have already entered in receipts. If you provided receipts or proof of purchase for items that you spent your grant funding on in the previous period, we will have already entered those into our system manually. And kind of what brought us to this point is it's really difficult for us as a granting organization to go through and itemize and determine whether or not something was a legitimate expense towards what you had budgeted for in your grant budget. And so what this is going to do is hopefully make the process a little bit more streamlined and simple. So basically, we've created a new system where you can enter in your receipts or invoices in an itemized fashion, so that once you hit the dollar amount that equals your grant award, then you're kind of done with that requirement for your grant reporting. So one little area that we've seen some confusion with some folks is that they misinterpreted the need for the receipts to be all of their receipts. So we just want to clarify for everyone that literally, if you were given, like in this case, they were given a $7,500 grant. Once you have submitted $7,500 in receipts that match up what you said you were going to be spending your money on, you're done. You don't have to enter anymore. So the good news is that reporting requirement for the entire year will be taken care of once we confirm and verify those. So we've also added in some other pieces, which I'll go over when we look at the actual form itself. But this email that I have pulled up here is basically kind of some suggestions for things that you'll need to gather and get ready. So first thing that we recommend is a receipt. A receipt is like the easiest way to document and confirm that you have spent the funds on exactly what you said that you were going to spend them on, and it, clearly justifies the expense, which is really cool. Sometimes we don't get receipts, and that's where we move to invoices and some sort of proof of payment. So this would then lead to some sort of a paper trail, and we'll go over that in a little bit more detail later. And then also, as part of your grant application, we had previously asked for some goal setting, and we're just trying throughout our grant reporting process to kind of see how you are progressing with the impact that you were hoping to measure for the grant program. So making sure you gather that information, that you've been collecting that information and are ready to share that before you open up the form and fill it out is helpful. And then we're also wanting to share success stories, pictures, videos that promote your program. Anything that kind of aligns your mission with our mission is really what we're looking for there. And then also providing us with any updates regarding your leadership, your board composition, challenges that you might be encountering with your program. So just kind of gathering all that information. And then once you have it all ready to go, you click on the submit report button and it will take you to your form. So I have the form pulled up here. If you filled out these fields on your grant application and your first quarter reports, these will be pre-populated with your program name, the goal that you made for your program. And as we've stated in some previous trainings and on the grant application, we're hoping that that goal is in the format of a SMART goal. So if you're not familiar with what SMART goals are, we highly recommend just Google what is a SMART goal, and it'll give you all kinds of tips and tricks on how to make sure that you're setting goals that are specific, they're measurable, they are achievable, they're relevant, and they are also realistic, as well as a time bound in some fashion. So we want to make sure that we kind of gather all those details. So most of these fields, if you have filled those out in either on your grant application or in a previous granting period, will be pre-populated. And so this first screen is literally just, hey, this is what you told us you were going to do. And we're just giving you a quick reminder here so that as you're giving us your updates for Q2, that you're kind of staying along the same lines with your reporting. I'm going to click next to go to the next screen. This is where we're talking about the impact reporting. So we talk about key performance indicators. We did get a lot of questions about that in Q1. So we've kind of put the definition of what a key performance indicator or a KPI is. So this is a measurement or a metric that tells us how you're doing in achieving a specific goal or objective. And it's going to help us to understand if your program is on track. And it'll also kind of help keep these performance indicators top of mind for you so that, we're about halfway through the year, a little bit more than halfway through the year. You can make adjustments to your program to still meet those goals by kind of keeping it top of mind and reminding yourself, where are we at in comparison to where we had hoped to be at this point in time. So an example that we've provided here is that throughout the course of the previous quarter, our program was able to serve X number of marginalized youth by providing them with X, Y, or Z, and that this represents an increase in the number of youth served by 15% in comparison to last year, which exceeds our original goal by 5%. So, what one program is measuring from another is going to be very different. Your objectives for what you're trying to do are probably very different. But we want you to be setting goals and then kind of taking a look at where you're at in comparison to where you had hoped to be, where you were last year, just so that we can get a really good idea of how your program is progressing. So once again, this first field here is what you shared as your goal KPI on your grant application. Some of you didn't fill that out, so it's going to be blank. We are more than happy to hop onto a call and chat with you about setting a key performance indicator and finding easy ways for you to measure this. We don't want it to be something that's cumbersome and time consuming. So we're more than happy to jump on a call and help you work through that. Also, we had asked for a baseline KPI on your grant application. For some of you, that was like 0. We've never done this before. For some folks, maybe you had baseline enrollment in your program and you want to increase that by 10%. So this is where, we had the goal was in our first one, but this is our baseline. And then at first quarter, we asked for where you were at so far. And then we're just asking for an update in this very last field. So this is really the only field you should have to fill out if you filled out Q1 completely and you filled this out on your grant application. If you didn't, once again, we're more than happy to hop on a call and help you establish that and get it into the system. Any questions so far? Okay, I think we're good. We'll move on to the next screen. So this is the new section, which talks about entering receipts. Now, like I mentioned before, we highly prefer receipts over any other form of documentation, just because it has all of the pieces that the IRS requires for documentation of an expense. And we are actually literally using the IRS guidance to help us determine what is a proper source documentation for an expense. So I'm going to just click in here. Supporting business documents, and this applies not just to for-profit, but specifically for nonprofits as well. We should all be keeping documentation that our expenses are valid and that they identify the payee, the amount paid, the proof of payment, the date that it was incurred, and it should include a description of the item purchased or the services that were rendered. So obviously, the easiest one there would be a receipt, a cash register tape receipt, or some sort of a credit card receipt statement, but it needs to be itemized and show what was purchased. Account statements can also work. Good example might be like if you have a curriculum provider and you're making payments monthly for your curriculum, they're going to send you an account statement that shows you what your charges are for the current month, but also what you paid for a payment that was applied to the previous month. So statements act a lot like receipts, whereas an invoice is only the money that's due. So an invoice actually has to be combined with either a canceled check and a statement from your bank showing a matching withdrawal from your bank account that shows that it actually came out of your bank account. So what we really prefer would be credit card receipts, account statements, and invoices that are accompanied by a check. Are there any questions about the IRS's reporting requirements? And just to kind of back up a little bit and share why we're using the IRS's guidance, it's because we are also subject to the IRS's requirements for any expenditures that we make, and because the grants are an actual expense that we have on our profit and loss and also our 990, we have to have this documentation. So it's kind of a funneling down effect, and so it affects us, so it affects you. But in the same token, it is just a best practice to keep your receipts and to have your accounting systems in place where those are easily retrievable and can be tracked back to whatever grant program. So going back to the entry of the receipt information, it's pretty easy, self-explanatory. You literally just type in the vendor name, the transaction date, a brief description of the specific items or services purchased. And ideally, you're going to put in there what it was, how many you got, and what the price was for each item. And then in the total amount, you'll just put the total amount of the receipt. And then we're asking you to categorize these by either a program service expense, a management and general expense, or a fundraising expense. Once again, if you're not sure how to categorize this, I highly recommend looking at the IRS guidance for what is a program service expense, what is a management and general expense, and what's a fundraising expense. And then from within those categories, you can select a finer detail as far as the expense type. It looks like we have a question. Looks like Lena would like to go to the IRS guidance briefly for those explanations. So I'm going to do a quick little Google search, which you guys can do this for yourselves after our call. But we'll just say, what does the IRS consider a management and general expense on a 990? It'll probably give us all three here. Let's see here. Oh boy, we got the whole shebang here. Let's search for management in general. There's got to be a better documentation for this. I'm trying to remember what line it is. I feel like it's way down here. It looks like Leslie found it. Oh, no, Leslie, this is the wrong link. We're looking for definitions of the 3 categorizations for the 990. So let's put IRS 990, fundraising expense, program service expense. Maybe we'll put that one on there. This is not the IRS. Shoot. Oh boy. Okay. Here we go. These are quick little descriptions, and I feel like maybe we did put these on here. We did. So program services, this is right on the form. It's cost directly related to delivering the organization's core mission and programs. So it's literally any expenses that you would have expended to deliver your services or your program. Management and general expenses are expenses associated with the overall administration and operational management. That's all that stuff that you do outside the provision of your program services. So any of your management and oversight, the finance, the accounting, just your HR, your IT, all that stuff that kind of gets lumped into management in general, versus a program service expense. And then outside of that would be anything pertaining to your fundraising expenses. So costs incurred in the process of soliciting and collecting donations for the support of your organization's mission. So those are the 3 separate categories that the IRS lumps everything into. And I think these are nice, pretty self-explanatory. And it looks like we have another question. Somebody found it, probably Leslie. Here we go. Here are the official statement of functional expenses for program services, management in general, and fundraising. So please, if you feel like reading all of this fun stuff and deciphering it with the IRS, I think she put that in the chat for everybody. So I hope that answers your questions.
Hey,
but
Julie.
basically, do we have any other questions before we move on to the expense types? Basically, if you select a program service and then it'll pull up these items here. One thing I did want to note is that we are very strict on the salary piece. Anything related to staff salaries, payroll expenses will not be included into what we consider something that we fund. We're pretty clear about that with our grant applications and in your grant award letter. So looks like Andrea C has a question. Go ahead and ask a question.
Can you hear us okay?
Yep.
Okay, so our question is, do we need to then notify our CPA about, because if you're using this for your 990 and like with your management and general expenses and then even program services expenses, then don't we have to then be careful about how our CPA notes those same expenses on our 990s?
Right. Well,
because it seems like it would be double reporting if you guys are reporting it on your end,
right,
and then reporting on our end. We're going to have to keep track of this for our CPA then too, correct?
Well, the difference between that is the reason that we're collecting the expense categorization information from you is we do use some of that information when we're looking at your budget. There are certain ratios that we're looking for to make sure that the oversight and, take for instance, if your fundraising expense was 85% of your total expenditures for the year, we'd be raising an eyebrow about that. We want you to be spending the good majority of your expenses on program service delivery, and that management in general and fundraising should be a lower percentage of your overall expenses. So this is actually more important on the budgeting side when we're actually approving your grant award. But actually everything that we pay out to you and these expenses that we are budgeting for are all program services, because that is our program service, is making out grants. So it will look different on ours, but the main reason that we're looking at it from your perspective is just so that we can make sure that those ratios are in line with what we would expect for a healthy nonprofit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but so on our grant, we didn't, ours is just for program services expense. Like we don't, in our grant, there's nothing related to fundraising at all. So we would never be submitting any
Right.
expenses for that.
We do have some grants that are more fundraising geared or marketing related. So for some organizations, they will have some fundraising expenses. So that's why that's there. You don't have to have any in that category if you didn't spend any of your grant funds on fundraising.
Okay, so just to clarify, because so the program services expenses is primarily where we're going to be submitting our expenses, because that's what we requested our grant for. And so I do need to make sure that we're tracking what then you guys are submitting and tracking on your 990, so that my CPA can make sure that we're tracking that on our end too, so it's not double claimed with the IRS between the two nonprofits.
Right. Well,
right?
Not necessarily. We're not double counting the same expense. It's just that if we get audited by the IRS, we need to show proof that the funds that we allocated for you to spend on certain items were actually spent on it.
Okay.
I wouldn't worry too much about these allocations.
Okay, sorry, it just made me nervous when you're pulling up the IRS pieces, because I'm like, wait, hold on a second, because if we're going off of the IRS designations, then I feel like my CPA needs to be in on this conference, because if we're going off the IRS guidelines, then I just wanted to make sure we're not both claiming program expenses on both.
No, we're not claiming your program service expense. Okay. We're claiming that we spent money on a grant to you, but we also have to do our due diligence to make sure that the funds were spent on what the budget was approved for, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. So then can I just ask one more clarifying question? So we have multiple programs at the Isaac Foundation, and we specifically asked for the grant and received the grant for one particular program. But for us, because we have other grant funders that fund other programs that weren't related to what we asked you guys for the grant for. So for instance, when I'm purchasing, let's just use a box of copy paper, for example, I actually take that cost of the copy paper and I'm amortizing that out, because the clubhouse, which you guys funded the grant for, doesn't use all of that copy paper. They use a percentage of it. So I have different programs that use some of that particular expense. So I amortize it out over multiple programs to make it fair to all of my grant funders, so that one funder isn't funding. Right. And so it sounds like, for your purposes and how this is getting tracked, that I'm going to have a hard time doing that, and I would have to go back.
Here's what I would do, and I've been giving this suggestion to all of our grantees that are doing the receipts, is take your larger expenditures for your program and get those entered first. And once you hit the total dollar amount that we've awarded to you, you're done with your needs for reporting. So if it's an expense that we've approved for your organization, what we just need to do is just get you up to that dollar amount. We're not gonna dive way into your finances and the cost allocation, that's an accounting thing. We just need some receipts to justify that the grant has been spent on things that were included in your grant budget, if that makes sense.
Jump in really quick, Julie.
Go ahead.
So the other thing that I will note on this, because we've had a couple conversations with some other grantees about this as well recently, is if you have receipts that are larger than, say, the amount is that we're funding, it's okay as long as it is somehow indicated on that itemized receipt that only X amount from this itemized receipt is going toward our program. As long as it's indicated on there, you can submit a receipt that's, say, a greater quantity. It just needs to be, shown somehow that is what you want to indicate. So you don't have to necessarily break up all of your receipts into individual receipts that are percentages for every single thing. As long as you're indicating to us clearly that on the receipt or whatever the statement is that you're using, that, you know, this particular item, this line item is being allocated toward our grant funding, then we can just use that amount then you can use that amount in the entry when you make the entry and
Right.
you know, recognize that.
So the dollar amount would then be different than what the actual receipt total would be. And we
Yes,
could
you would put a
notify-
narrative for that in this box here.
Okay, got it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so as long as we can see like what you're talking about, then it's okay how we get to that number. It just needs to be clear. Because I've had a couple of instances already with other individuals where we had to sit down and go back through all of the documentation because, you know, in just looking at it, you know, maybe it makes sense to you, but it doesn't translate that way to us. And so that's why we created this new process, is because this gives us a really rigid but straightforward outline to say where each of these items are coming from when we're looking at your documentation. And I think I'll stop there because Julie's going to probably move to the point where we talk about that there's also an uploading aspect to this for those PDFs, so it'll tie into that as well.
Right, and I really love this feedback. Is that Molly I'm talking to?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So Molly, great feedback. And I think what we'll do for Q3 is we'll actually, and for all of our quarters actually, we'll update this description here to include the ability to not have the full receipt amount, as long as you put in some details as to why those amounts don't match because of your cost allocation process. And then you would just adjust this total amount down here to be the amount of the receipt pertaining to this expense. So that makes total sense. I appreciate that feedback.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Hey, Julie, I just have a question. This is Lena.
Okay.
So is the link that Leslie sent accurate then? So the link that she sent to the IRS page that has the purple highlights on what documentation can include, is that true for the grant funding reporting?
Yes.
Okay, so just to double check, documents for expenses include the following: cancel checks, cash registered tape receipts, or account statements.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we can upload all of those and that's the proof of purchase.
Yes.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you.
It looks like Shannon has a question in the chat, or well, a comment maybe. And I think that we have an answer to it. So her question has to do with having a ton of small receipts and wondering about reaching a capacity issue or an upload issue.
I think we currently have our settings set at 99 receipts, but we can actually increase that if you need more. So if you guys do bump into an issue, please let us know. Or if you think it's going to be more than 99. I can always increase that up to like 999. I don't think anybody will have 1,000 receipts. I hope. Any other questions before we move on? Cool. Okay, I'm going to click next. If you do have additional receipts, you know, you may have like 20 receipts you need to enter. Hopefully it's only like 4 or 5. But you click on this plus add item, which is a tiny little thing down here. That's why I put a note here in our form to click add item to add subsequent receipts for itemizing them. And then in the next screen, you can upload all of your receipts all in one upload. So you just click on add file here, and then you'll select it or select all 99 of them and it'll upload. The limits here are that currently we have it set to 99 files per upload. So like I said, I can try increasing that number. Maximum file upload size is 25 megabytes. And I think that might be per file, but I'm not 100% sure on that. I'll have to look on that. The allowed file types are JPEG, PNG, the GIF files, or PDF. We're trying to make it simple so that if you just you can even click a picture with your camera rather than having to be worrying about getting them scanned or all that kind of stuff. We're trying to make that as simple as possible. We are asking though that rather than lumping them all together in one big file, if you can have a separate file for each receipt or statement or invoice, and that makes it easier for our accounting on the back end just to match them up to what you guys have entered. And then, in fact, now that I'm thinking about the feedback we just got from Molly, we'll probably have a total amount field, but then the amount of the actual expense, like the receipt total, and then the expense total on this receipt. So that way, if there is a variance from there, that we're accounting for that. And then one thing to note here, we have had quite a few people that are just printing out either transaction reports, or they're giving us just a bank statement or a spreadsheet. Unfortunately, those don't fulfill the requirements of that IRS reporting. And so unless it's giving us the ability to form a paper trail for that transaction, it's kind of difficult. So yeah, looks like Leslie's answering a question offline for Lena regarding that supporting documentation. Anyhow, we have to have all those different elements in order for it to qualify as a receipt. But anyway, if you guys encounter any issues with uploading those documents, please let us know right away so that we can get the form fixed for other folks that might encounter the same issue.
Can you clarify really quick for us, if we are uploading on this page and have all the information on the receipts, does that mean that we do not have to hand enter them on the other area?
No, they need to be entered in both places.
They need to be hand entered on the other area.
What was that?
So they need to be uploaded and hand entered?
Yes, the reason being is we are trying to track how much has been spent for your total grant. It is a very cumbersome process for us to try to differentiate. You know, a good example is exactly what Molly brought up, is that we might get a receipt and it says it's for $10,000 worth of expenses, but we don't know if, you know, maybe 5,000 of that goes to another program. We've had situations where we had hot dogs on a receipt with, you know, on the exact same receipt, they've got supplies for school supplies. You know, we don't know how much of that goes towards this or that or the other thing. And so having you guys communicate that to us in the form of entering it into the computer for us really helps clarify what actually is a grant expense and how it should be accounted for. And it actually automatically totals, and it'll let you know in subsequent quarters if you meet your total, then you don't have to report on that again ever for the rest of the year. So that's why I always say take your biggest expenditures first and show those proof of purchases first, and kind of get as much of that out of the way so that you're not entering a bunch of $2 and $5 receipts. I can see how that would be completely annoying.
Yeah.
The other thing I'll say on that front is, so what we did in preparation for this new change in Q2 was I went through and manually uploaded all of the receipts that we received from Q1 for all of our grantees. And I will say I could be the most empathetic about this process because it is very time consuming. But one of the nice things about it is that once you have it in there, there is no room for error. So basically, it takes out a lot of the guesswork on both ends. You don't have to worry or wonder about how much has been spent. And we also don't have to worry or wonder about how much has been spent because it does that auto calculation for us. So even though there is a little bit more of a time consuming aspect when it comes to manual entry of those receipts, it just removes any need for discrepancy. And that has been an issue in the past, even looking back retroactively at, you know, the receipt discrepancies for 2022, for example. That's something that I have been working on as well. And, you know, we don't want it to get to the point where we're having to go backward, you know, an entire year and say, hey, your receipts didn't total, please go find us receipts from 1 year ago, which has occurred a few times. And so just to avoid all of that, avoid anything like that happening, because things do happen sometimes, things slip through the cracks. If we're having everyone enter things kind of in the quote unquote real time, quarter by quarter, it kind of accounts for that, and it removes that discrepancy issue for the most part.
Any other questions about that?
So
Okay.
Julie, this is Shannon from College Success Foundation. I put something in the chat earlier, and I'm just trying to balance out like where we're at with trying to get all these documents together. So to your point, like Leslie, I think what you were just saying is that it's sometimes organizations don't know how much they've spent of grants. But yet, you know, kind of we're keeping track on an internal basis with all of our Wells Fargo, our accounting, our accounts payable, et cetera. Is there, because we have funding coming from a number of different sources, some of the things that we do are like selective audits of receipts. Is there any capacity for something along those lines within the way that Believe in Me, Julie, this would be for you, is operating just in terms of like time capacity, putting into uploading all of the receipts? I just am trying to figure out how to make this all happen by this coming week. And I'm also balancing.
We don't want it to be
other-
too cumbersome on anyone. Really, that is not our goal at all. We're not trying to create extra work for anyone. So I'd be more than happy, Shannon, to kind of talk offline about how we might be able to facilitate just a big upload of all of your information.
Okay.
But having said that, it still needs to go into the system so that what we don't want to have is a one-off here and a one-off there. So that way we're creating more work again for ourselves. The whole here is to try to streamline and make it consistent from one organization to the next so that it doesn't become, you know.
This is Holly again. We're in the midst of our summer programming, and this is going to be a tremendous amount of bookkeeping.
Right. And here's what I
timeline.
would say to that, Shannon, since it is new and we did give you only a couple of weeks to enter it, a little workaround just so that you can kind of move on with your summer and maybe push this to a subsequent quarter is just enter one receipt for Q2 and then kind of budget some time in Q3 to kind of get yourselves caught up and come up with an action plan. That'd be a quick way to get Q2 done.
Okay, yeah, I think that was Holly that said, I mean, we have summer programming starting next week, so I don't know what Holly has going on. Sounds like she's got a lot going on, but yeah, I mean, we're kind of in that same boat. So to your point, maybe we can strategize when we're uploading based on time. And thanks for the thoughts around, I mean, you have been so generous with all of us here. And so and obviously the IRS and the compatibility time of thing, but so it's definitely wanting to meet that. And at the same time, okay, where do we allocate that time? So to your point, maybe Q3, we can slide some of those things so that we can get comfortable in the system and then figure out how to make it work going forward. We're just in that unfortunate situation, which is not unfortunate, but we do have those smaller receipts. So thank you, Leslie, that we've got capacity to upload, but it might take us a little bit longer in length. But yeah, thank you. The generosity that you are giving to all of us, I know is immense and very helpful for our programming. So
like I said, I think if you want to just enter a receipt or two to kind of get your Q2 reports like kind of out of the way, and so that we're not hassling you for Q2, we can make an action plan for how to get your stuff entered in Q3 and kind of get you up to speed.
Julie, there's another comment in the chat. This one's from Lisa.
Yeah, so Lisa's wondering if we could adopt some sort of contract language that puts a burden of proof on the grantee and not Believe in Me. She says she's never had to provide receipts in this manner with other funders. I think it's pretty commonplace, Lisa, for there to be language inside any grant application that that the grantor can audit and will audit the expenditure of funds. So I think that is more common than you would think. But we can certainly look into that, and I will put it past our grants administration committee. You know, we're just upholding the policies and procedures of our grants administration committee. So we get the fun job of implementing this. So I can put that feedback to them and we'll kind of see where we go from there. Great feedback.
Thanks, Julie. It's Lisa. I appreciate that, just because, you know, and I'm very familiar with several people on this call, but I have a funding from a Vista Foundation, Innovia. I know somebody mentioned Wells Fargo. I have Balmer. I have Northeast Youth Center. And we've just never we've never done receipts with them. We've always done our bookkeeper and accountant shows what we've spent, and we do the pluses and minuses, zero it out, send it over, and then we do a final report on what we've spent. And so I just wonder if there might not be a piece of language in some of those, because you guys are still, I mean, you're giving around 500,000 right now. Is that right? About a $500,000 out?
Actually, I think we were probably closer to about 300,000 this past year.
300,000. Okay. So maybe it's that, maybe it's because of those different thresholds. I don't know. I just know that when I've gotten those pieces of funding, that's, and I agree with Shannon, you have been incredibly generous with all of us with your funding, and I appreciate it. I've been holding on to the money more than anything because I want to make sure that I can do maybe a larger purchase or whatever, or one big event, so that I'm not nickel and diming, because we are placing Believe in Me money next to Tyler's donations, next to Avista, etc., to make a whole program, if you will.
Right.
So I'm thinking about that too, just like, how do I, that's why even with Leslie, I told her I didn't do a Q1. I did a Q1 report, but I didn't have any expenditures because I want to make sure that it's not getting cumbersome.
Right. And that's totally fine. Waiting until Q3 or Q4 to spend your funds, that's totally okay, as long as you communicate that in your report. So yeah.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So next section is all about sharing the good work that you guys are doing with the community. And so we've provided you just with some bullet points on the way that you can share your story about your grant funding and the impact that that's having out in the community. We really want the word to get out there about the great work that you're doing. So these are just ideas of things that you can do or may have done in the past that would qualify for the next page. Are there any questions about any of these marketing ideas before we move on? Okay. So this is just basically, if you want to do a screen grab or upload a document, all the different types of files are allowed here, but you are limited to 25 megabytes for the file size, and you can upload to 10 files here. If you have a video or something that might exceed that size, feel free to just email that to us or send us a link to a zip file. Should be fairly simple and straightforward. Any questions? And then the very last page on our reporting form has to do with, any unanticipated changes. And Lisa, this is a great place where you can just type to your heart's content. It's probably going to have any information that you would have typed in here in a previous quarter report. So please don't delete that. We kind of want to keep a trail of it, but just tack it on or append it to what you had put there in the previous quarter, just to say, we've had a changeover in our leadership. We have a new executive director. Their name is, XYZ. Here's their contact information. We just kind of want to stay in the know about any adjustments that you've had to make or any changes in leadership. Maybe things are going better than you thought that they were going to go, or maybe, we had a lot of people use this field during COVID just to say, hey, we can't spend our money the way that we thought. Can we potentially bump that into next year to spend? Can we, this is where we learned about some of those requests for special accommodations, and we are happy to present those to our Grants Administration Committee for review and approval. If you need some adjustments made to what you thought you were originally going to spend the grant funding on, this is just a great way for us to stay in the know and to communicate and to make your program successful. That's really what we're all about, is wanting to make sure that the work you're doing is really impacting those kids positively. So that's kind of where we're at. A couple of things I wanted to share with folks. Let's see if I can find this video, and I'm going to put a link to this in the chat. This is a training video made by the IRS that talks about all the accounting things that you should be doing as a 501c3 to maintain your tax exempt status. So regardless of what we ask for receipts or invoices or statements, or, you know, helping us kind of on the back end, these are things that every 501c3 should be doing to maintain their status as a tax exempt organization. So I wanted to share that with everyone. And maybe after this meeting, I'll have Leslie kind of type up an email to kind of regroup and provide some of these links to these documents for you guys. And then also we'll have a recording of this video that's going to be posted that folks can go back and listen to again if they missed something, or we kind of breezed over it a little bit too quickly for you to get in there. So that's pretty much it. Does anybody have any questions, any further questions or comments? We love the feedback. We do take that into consideration. The way that we've updated our form at this point is the collaborative efforts of, you know, previous grantees and the feedback we've had about previous years. So we're happy to make adjustments and to take your ideas and suggestions to our grants administration committee for review and approval. So
Lena, did you get your question answered?
Yeah, I have a question about the previous slide, the one about the zip files and the kind of how you're sharing your marketing.
Right.
Right. How is that different from the previous slide of sharing what you're doing in the community?
Oh, so this is just basically ideas here. So if you have done any of these things, take a screen grab of it, or, you know, just take the original artwork and upload it here. We just kind of want to see what it is so that we can potentially share that same information with our audience as well. We want to share the good work that you're doing out in the community.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, looks good.
Yeah, those are just examples. They're just ideas for you.
Any other questions from anyone?
Thank you for this webinar. This was very helpful to see live because I was a little bit uncertain going into the form. So thank you for hosting for a little bit more detail. Very appreciated.
We are so glad to help everybody out and to make this a much easier process for you. And what I can tell you is we're trying to do our best to communicate things. So one thing I encourage everyone to do is read the emails inside and out and read the forms inside and out. You know, it's easy to just kind of go in there and try to fill in a field and think that we got it. But oftentimes we're noticing a lot of the questions that we get are answered in either our emails and just the text that are on our form. So please, you know, just slow down and read everything thoroughly. And if something still doesn't make sense, please reach out to us. We're here to help you. And like I said, if something's not clear, we want to communicate better. So just let us know and we'll do our best to improve it in future quarters for everyone.
And I mean, to that end, I try to be really good about responding as quickly as possible. So I try to make myself really available. So if you have any questions, feel free to call me or email me. And I usually get back within the same day or the next day, just depending on the need. So don't hesitate to reach out.
Good. Looks like we have another chat question.
No, it was just me appreciating Leslie because she is very fast.
We are so grateful to have Leslie on board. When we had a much smaller team, it was very difficult for me to manage all this on my own. So I'm very appreciative to have Leslie. She's been a godsend to our organization. So she's a very sweet person and is very willing to help everyone. So thank you so much to Leslie.
Well, thanks, guys. But yeah, I'm happy to help.
Any other questions? Okay, well, I think we're going to go ahead and bid everyone farewell. I thank you for joining our information session and wish you the best of luck in getting everything filled out quickly and efficiently. Thanks for all of your help. We appreciate everything that you're doing.